Hi, my name is Tim, and I will be playing a Dwarven Runesmith at next quest, Blood and Gold, and I just wanted to present a few ideas I had about how runesmithing could look like in the new LARP event. First off, I just want to clarify that I am only talking about Dwarven runes. I'm not talking about rune masters, which are runes created by humans. Alright, so moving on, the first few things you need to know about runes, Dwarven runes in particular, that they can be created in two ways. They can be temporary runes or they can be permanent runes. Permanent runes take months to create, according to the lore, and so I wouldn't expect to be creating them during the quest event, as opposed to temporary runes. Temporary runes can only take, can take half an hour to an hour to make. So what I'm talking about today is more how we could roleplay using those temporary runes, not the permanent ones. So temporary runes, like all runes, they come in three categories, or three main categories, for armor, for weapons, and for talismans. And talismans can be amulets, they can be rings, they can be necklaces, that type of thing. And with temporary runes, like I said, it can take half an hour to an hour to create, and they have to be created on items of good quality or best quality, and that's according to the rules from Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay Realms of Sorcery 2nd edition. Okay, and most of the runes that I'm taking are from the 2nd edition of the Realms of Sorcery document. And so the idea I came up with for creating runes is using glitter glue. The ones that I'm demonstrating here, they're like Crayola glitter glues. They come in lots of different colors. They're pretty cheap. The benefits of them are, of course, that they're non-toxic, that they can be washed off, that they're washable and can be removed with a bit of soap and water. And so that's why I was recommending them. Also, they kind of glow. And we know from the lore on the creation of runes, what the dwarves are doing, bringing magic into the items that they're creating, and so there is like described a glow of power or of that magic. And I've got an example here of an armor rune. So this one is actually a rune of, well, it's supposed to be a Rune of Stone, which is an armor rune, and I've got the reference source from Realms of Sorcery, the 1st edition. I'm not sure if you can see it there. Yeah. No, that's the fire rune. There, stone. Yep. So it's supposed to look like a somewhat of an E. I've kind of not done it so well. And that's one of the cons of this, this type of rune forging, is that it'll take a lot of practice to get them looking accurate. On the other side, however, I do have this, which is a Rune of Fortitude. And I've got a reference pic of what it's supposed to look like. There. It's just circled in green. There's a Rune of Fortitude, and it kind of looks pretty close. I'm only just pointing to that one there, not these ones. These were just little practice ones. So it's Rune of Fortitude. And so the way I would recommend role-playing having these runes, so the rune crafting system is different, and I'll do a separate video for my thoughts about crafting them, but that if a player had a rune such as this, and we'll start with this one, the Rune of Stone. So the description from Realms of Sorcery about the Rune of Stone is, okay, so it's an armor rune. Armor bearing this rune provides +1 armor point to a maximum of 6 armor points. This is an exception to the normal limit of 5 armor points. So it adds an extra armor point. That's for the permanent use of that rune. However, if you have a temporary rune, which are what these are, as permanent, but once the rune is activated, the benefit only lasts for 1 minute. And so I wanted to talk about this idea of activating the rune. So for me, I thought that activating or releasing the rune so that it releases its magic, I thought it would be a good 2-step process. And so that the rune is released by crossing out the rune with an opaque substance while simultaneously saying a command phrase. So the purpose of having a two-step process is that the rune cannot be released accidentally. For example, if you're having a meal and you accidentally put some stew on it and then it kind of blots out your rune, you can always just clean that up with a piece, with a cloth or something. But also, if someone who knows you have a rune comes in and deliberately tries to like scratch it out or get rid of it, that won't accidentally activate it. So that's one of the purposes of having a two-step process. The other one is if someone steals this piece of armor that you have managed to get a temporary rune on, they can't use it without the right activation command. And I think that having this two-step process is pretty good in terms of the roleplay opportunities it describes. So just an example of how you would use it, say I'm in a fight and I'm down to like my last hit point and I want to use this rune. So this is the Rune of Stone. It gives you one more armor point. So just by crossing it off, and I've got this red chalk, you just cross it off and you say the activation code. For me, the activation code I was thinking of was Gorak Nu, which is Dwarven or Khazalid for magic now. So by crossing it off, I go Gorak Nu, all of a sudden I have an extra armor point, which is great, except that it only lasts for 1 minute. So if I'm in the thick of the fight, I'm nearly dead, I cross it off, say Gorak Nu, and then I can fight for as long as that armor point gives me, or for a minute at least. After a minute, that extra armor is gone. All right. For the other rune, the Rune of Fortitude, the big blue and silver one there, similar story. Now this one gives 4 hit points, or what was the word they used? Anyway, so it gives 4 points. So if you're down in your health and your armor and you're nearly dead, by crossing it off and saying Gorak Nu, suddenly for 1 minute you've got 4 extra hit points. So that would be the best time to say charge at the enemy, do a last kind of berserker attack until you die. It's kind of a way of role-playing that. So when I say about roleplay opportunities, like I've got just this chalk as an example of activating the rune by crossing it out and then saying the activation phrase. But you can use anything that's kind of opaque and not clear. So for example, if you were dying and you had like a rune inscribed on a weapon or a piece of armor, you could say use a tomato sauce packet, those little plastic ones. You could like dip your fingers in it and pretend that you're like bleeding. Using your blood, you could cross out the rune and then say your activation phrase, and then it gives you an extra 4 points of health to get you back in the fight, or extra armor to get you back in the fight. So those were my thoughts of how I would roleplay that. Also, the good thing about it is that by crossing out the visible rune and saying the activation phrase, the person who is attacking you, the person who is in the fight with you, they actually get some kind of cue that something's going to happen, so that they know that something bad is about to happen, or something is going to be released, some sort of magical effect. The danger is, of course, that you're trying to do this in the heat of the fight when you don't have actually that much time to back off and activate it. But then that could be used by your enemy as a chance of, wow, I need to get in and rush this guy before this is activated or this takes place. So I thought that using this scheme is actually pretty good and could provide some interesting roleplay events. Then once it's used, say the battle's over and the player is dead, or the player retires back to their camp, at the next available combat moment, they can remove the rune with a bit of soap and water, and that shows that they have used the rune and it no longer exists, because temporary runes, they fade away after they've been used once. Also, if say marshals or say other runesmiths are around and they see someone with a temporary rune and they see it crossed out, look, they'll go up to them and say, hey, you need to remove that, or here, let me pull out my brush and water and wash that off, because that rune is no longer usable. Cool, so that's what I thought. Would like to hear any interesting thoughts you had about it, whether you thought this was good or bad, or some recommendations. Would love some ideas to improve on this. Also, I'm going to post kind of a written form of this so you can have a quick read in a Word document up shortly. Thanks very much. Tim out.